Darren West was just cleaning out his garage when he found the first body. A small white box, wrapped tight in plastic, heavy for its size. When he peeled back the layers, his world collapsed. Inside was his wife's secret, a perfectly formed baby, dead for years. But that was just the beginning, because when police arrived, they found 6 more boxes, 6 more babies, all killed by the same hands that had cooked his dinner and tucked his children into bed every night for a decade. Megan Huntsman had fooled everyone. Her husband, her kids, her neighbors. For 10 straight years, she'd been getting pregnant, giving birth alone, and strangling newborns with her bare hands. Then she'd wrap them up like Christmas presents and stack them in the garage like old holiday decorations. April 20th, 2015. Judge Daryl McDade stared across his courtroom at the suburban mother who just confessed to serial infanticide. 30 years on the bench, and he'd never seen anything like it. 6 life sentences. No parole until 2064. She'll be 89 years old. But here's what keeps investigators awake at night. Megan wasn't some deranged monster living in the shadows. She was your neighbor, the mom at school pickup, the woman buying groceries while her murdered children rotted 20 feet from her kitchen table. She passed every background check, fooled every friend, and managed to hide the most unthinkable crime spree in Utah history right under everyone's noses. How do you kill 6 babies and fool the world for a decade? Tonight, we're about to find out. Darren West had just been released from prison. 9 years behind bars for drug crimes. 9 years of wondering what had happened to his marriage, his family, his life. He'd spent those years in state prison, then moved to a Salt Lake City halfway house. Now, finally, he was coming home. But Megan was gone. His wife of over a decade had moved out while he was locked up, left the house empty except for boxes of forgotten memories and the ghosts of what their family used to be. Darren planned to move back in, start over, maybe salvage something from the wreckage of his addiction. First, though, he had to clean out the garage. He wasn't alone that day. One of his daughters was helping him sort through the accumulated debris of a broken marriage. Father and daughter working together, trying to make sense of boxes that had been sitting untouched for years. That's when Darren found it. A small white box wrapped in plastic, heavy for its size. Something about the weight felt wrong. The way it shifted when he lifted it. The duct tape wrapped around it like someone had been very careful to keep whatever was inside from getting out. When Darren peeled back the plastic, his world ended. Inside was a baby, perfectly formed, long dead, wrapped in a towel like someone had been preparing it for sleep, not storage. Darren's hand started shaking. His daughter screamed. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible question began to form. If there was one box, were there others? West called police immediately, his voice breaking as he tried to explain to the 911 dispatcher what he'd found. I believe there's a dead baby in a bag in my garage. The words sounded impossible even as he said them. Pleasant Grove Police Department arrived within minutes. Officers who thought they'd seen everything suddenly found themselves staring into a suburban nightmare. Because Darren's instinct was right. There weren't just one box. There were 7, each infant wrapped in rags and towels, placed in separate cardboard boxes. 7 tiny bodies that had been hidden in this garage for years while family barbecues happened 20 feet away, while children played in the driveway, while neighbors borrowed lawnmowers and exchanged Christmas cookies. Detective Dan Beckstrom would later testify about that crime scene. 30 years of police work, and he'd never seen anything like it. The methodical packaging, the careful storage, the way each box had been labeled and dated, as if someone was keeping inventory of their own children's corpses. The news spread through Pleasant Grove like wildfire. By evening, news vans lined the street. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering questions that had no good answers. What kind of person kills their own babies and stores them like winter clothes? The answer was worse than anyone imagined. 1996, the first pregnancy, the first birth, the first murder. Huntsman was 21 years old, young enough to claim ignorance, old enough to know exactly what she was doing. She gave birth in her home, alone, with no medical supervision, no prenatal care, no hospital records, no paper trail that could later expose her secret. What happened next would become her signature method: strangulation. Quick, quiet, efficient. During her confession, she admitted to choking all the infants, with the exception of one stillborn, a method that left minimal evidence, required no weapons, and could be accomplished in seconds. Then came the ritual, the careful wrapping of each tiny body in towels or shirts, the placement in individual cardboard boxes, the storage in the garage like archive belongings, each box labeled and dated with the methodical precision of someone organizing their tax records. 7 pregnancies over 10 years, 6 murders, 1 stillborn child that she concealed with the same care as the one she killed. The logistics alone should have been impossible. How do you hide 7 pregnancies from a husband, 3 children, neighbors, and community members? How do you give birth 7 times without anyone noticing? How do you dispose of 7 bodies without raising suspicion? Huntsman had advantages that made her crimes possible. Her husband, Darren, spent significant periods incarcerated for drug crimes. During his absences, she had complete control over the household. No one to question her changing body or unusual behavior. No one to wonder why she was spending so much time alone. But even when Darren was home, his addiction provided cover. Police concluded that his drug use was so severe that he might not have been capable of recognizing what was happening around him. A man lost in chemical haze might not notice his wife's changing body or extended absences. Huntsman also had the advantage of her established reputation as a private person who kept to herself. She'd already hidden the pregnancies of her 3 living children from extended family. When she became reclusive during her secret pregnancies, it didn't seem unusual. It was just Megan being Megan. The births themselves were carefully planned events. Authorities confirmed that she gave birth to each infant in her home. No hospitals, no midwives, no witnesses. She would go into labor, deliver alone, and commit murder within hours or minutes of birth. The psychological mechanism that allowed her to kill her own newborns remains a mystery. Most mothers experience an overwhelming biological drive to protect their children. The bond between mother and infant is one of the strongest forces in nature. What allows someone to override that instinct and systematically murder their own offspring? During her confession, she initially claimed there were 4 murders, then said she didn't know how many there might be, at one point suggesting 8 or 9. The casual uncertainty suggests a level of detachment that's almost inhuman. But the methodical nature of the concealment suggests the opposite of detachment. Someone who carefully wraps each body, stores them in labeled boxes, and maintains their hiding place for years isn't acting from emotional numbness. They're acting from calculated self-preservation. The storage system reveals the depth of Huntsman's planning. 7 cardboard boxes, each containing a murdered infant, stored in the family garage for years. The boxes weren't hidden in a remote location or buried in the backyard. They were kept 20 feet from the kitchen table, where her living children ate their meals. The preservation of the bodies was remarkably good. Despite being stored in cardboard boxes for up to 18 years, forensic investigators were able to determine causes of death, establish timelines, and extract DNA evidence. The cool, dry climate of Utah helped preserve the remains, but the careful packaging also played a role. It was as if Huntsman had been preserving evidence of her own crimes, keeping trophies of her systematic murders. Or perhaps she simply lacked the emotional connection to properly dispose of bodies that meant nothing more to her than discarded belongings. The final infant, found in 2006, was stillborn. This 7th baby had died naturally during birth, but Huntsman concealed the body with the same care as the one she murdered. Even when presented with a death that wasn't her fault, she chose concealment over honesty. It was a perfect summary of a decade-long pattern. When faced with any pregnancy, regardless of outcome, Huntsman's default response was secrecy and concealment. By 2006, she had perfected her system. 7 pregnancies hidden from the world, 6 murders committed without detection, 7 tiny bodies stored like seasonal decorations in the family garage. And through it all, she maintained a facade of a normal suburban mother dealing with her husband's addiction. April 13, 2014, one day after the discovery, Megan Huntsman was booked into Utah County Jail on 6 counts of murder, $6 million bail. the highest amount ever set in Utah County history for a defendant without prior violent offenses. But the investigation was just beginning. Pleasant Grove Police Department had never handled a case like this. 7 dead infants found in cardboard boxes wasn't covered in any training manual. The crime scene alone presented challenges that pushed forensic capabilities to their limits. The autopsies had to be completed under extraordinary circumstances. Bodies that had been preserved in cardboard storage for up to 18 years. DNA extraction from remains that existed in a preservation state between mummification and decay. But the evidence held up. Autopsy results confirmed that 6 of the 7 infants had died from strangulation or suffocation. The 7th was stillborn. DNA testing confirmed that Darren West was the father of all 7 children. The timeline matched Huntsman's periods of concealed pregnancy perfectly. Meanwhile, investigators were conducting the most sensitive interrogation in department history. How do you question a mother about systematically murdering her own children? Huntsman's initial response was careful cooperation. She agreed to speak with investigators without demanding a lawyer. She answered questions calmly, methodically, with the same careful precision she'd used to conceal her crimes for nearly 2 decades. During her first interview, she admitted to 4 murders. Then she said she didn't know how many there might be. At one point, she suggested 8 or 9. The casual uncertainty was more disturbing than outright denial. It suggested that the murders had been so routine, so unremarkable to her, that she couldn't keep an accurate count. But as the questioning continued, a clearer picture emerged. Huntsman eventually admitted that she had choked all the infants, with the exception of 1 stillborn. She provided timelines that matched the forensic evidence. She described her methods with clinical detachment. What she couldn't explain was why. Investigators pressed for motives. Was it postpartum depression? Financial stress? Fear of her husband's reaction? Huntsman's answers were vague, contradictory, unsatisfying. She mentioned her drug addiction, her unhappy marriage, her inability to care for more children. But none of those explanations addressed the central question: why murder instead of adoption, abandonment, or any of the dozen other options available to her? The investigation expanded beyond the crime scene. Detectives interviewed family members, neighbors, co-workers, extended family. The investigation uncovered a pattern of secrecy and isolation that went far beyond the murders themselves. Huntsman had systematically cut herself off from any support systems or oversight that might have exposed her crimes. Investigators initially focused significant attention on Darren West, finding it hard to believe that he could have lived in a house without knowing what was happening. But the evidence consistently pointed to his ignorance. His periods of incarceration corresponded with several of the pregnancies. His severe drug addiction provided explanation for his inability to notice his wife's condition. Most importantly, there was no physical evidence connecting him to crimes. The investigation concluded that Huntsman had acted alone, concealing her crimes even from her immediate family. The legal proceedings moved with unusual speed for such a complex case. On February 12, 2015, Huntsman pleaded guilty to 6 counts of felony murder. No trial, no lengthy appeals process, no attempt to claim insanity or diminished capacity. Prosecutors had decided not to seek the death penalty. The case presented unique circumstances that made capital punishment unlikely to succeed. Huntsman was a mother with no prior violent history. The murders had occurred during periods of alleged mental health crisis and drug addiction. Most importantly, she had cooperated fully with investigators and shown what appeared to be genuine remorse. The sentencing hearing on April 20th, 2015, provided the only public forum for understanding Huntsman's motivations. Judge Daryl McDade presided over proceedings that would determine whether a mother who killed 6 of her own children deserved any mercy from the justice system. Huntsman addressed the court directly, stating that she was too drug-addicted to care for more children. She described a life consumed by methamphetamine and alcohol abuse. She claimed to be trapped in an abusive marriage that left her feeling powerless and desperate. She spoke of severe depression that had warped her thinking and made her believe that murder was preferable to bringing unwanted children into a troubled household. But the most powerful statements came from her surviving children. 2 of her daughters submitted letters of support, asking the court for mercy. Despite learning that their mother had killed 6 of their siblings, these young women found the strength to advocate for leniency. Their letters describe a mother who had struggled with addiction and mental illness, but who had never harmed her living children. Judge McDade faced an impossible decision. How do you sentence a mother who has committed systematic infanticide? What justice is appropriate for someone who has killed 6 newborns but raised 3 children successfully? The sentence reflected that complexity. 6 consecutive sentences of 5 years to life in prison, with a minimum of 30 years before parole eligibility. Huntsman's first parole hearing is scheduled for April 2064, when she will be 89 years old. It was a sentence that acknowledged both the severity of her crimes and the unique circumstances surrounding them. Huntsman would spend the rest of her productive life in prison, but she retained the theoretical possibility of freedom in extreme old age. The immediate impact on Huntsman's surviving family was devastating. Her 3 living children suddenly had to process the reality that their mother had killed 6 of their siblings. These young adults discovered they had been living 20 feet from evidence of serial murder. Huntsman was transferred to Utah State Prison, where she began serving her life sentence. Prison officials implemented specialized mental health monitoring protocols. She was placed in protective custody, both for her own safety and prevent her from harming other inmates' children during family visits.